So I want to welcome everybody today. My name is Sherry Evans Stanton, and I'm the director of the Sierra Club Delaware chapter. We're especially excited. Today we have Kurt Davis with us to talk about birding in Delaware. And Kurt is a global development scholar and an avid birder. He also serves on the board of Delaware Audubon. So let's get started. So Kurt, many of us love being outdoors. We love seeing birds, but we don't know much about how to identify them. How would you say you get started if you want to do birding?
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Sierra Club, for inviting me to participate in this. I just want to start before that. I want to get right in front of that just to make this a little bit interesting and create some suspense here with some trivia questions that I will answer at the end. So while I'm talking for the next 20 minutes or so, people can maybe communicate with you through the chat feature or think about this and just, try and get an idea of what they think about how many species of birds have been recorded in Delaware. And another question I have is, what's the most amount of species that have been seen by one person or a group of people in one day? And then what is the furthest outside of their range that some birds have traveled to pass through Delaware? So, there's birds on every continent almost, not quite Antarctica, but birds come from all around. So sometimes they get blown off course or something in them makes them want to come visit us in Delaware. So just think about that while I'm talking. Thank you. So how do you get started? Well, be interested in your surroundings. So I think anyone who's participating in this right now, anyone who's logged on to this is interested in getting started in birding. So that's a start. And then after that, it's just really driven by your motivation to learn more about the birds around you. And otherwise, the overhead is really quite low. So that just requires a good pair of binoculars and a field guide. And then maybe a camera, a notebook to record your observations, and that's about it. So I'll talk quickly about field guides. There's many different field guides to select from. I use this. It's the Sibley's guide. It's a pretty common guide. This is an older edition. There is a new edition out now. A lot of people are happy with the National Geographic field guide. And then even the National Audubon Society has one as well. So I would go into a local bookstore and see which one of these, literally fits your hand best, because you're going to be carrying this around with you when you're out in the field. And then whether you prefer to have photographs or whether you like to have nice paintings, that can make a difference. One suggestion or one recommendation I have about selecting a field guide is that you'll see on this one, it says Eastern birds, or Eastern North America. This one also says Eastern North America. The older edition is all of North America. So that can be a little bit cumbersome, because if you're brand new, there's a lot of birds to pick from, and there's no sense in sorting through birds in California when you're in Delaware. Binoculars, that's the other thing people commonly ask about for getting started. So I have actually a slide on that. I'm gonna read from that. Actually, I will share this slide. And the share feature is share screen and here. Okay, is everyone reading Binoculars? Okay, great. So these are 8-powered binoculars. And these are 10-powered binoculars. They serve different functions. So the 8 powers will give you a wider field of view. The 10 power will get you closer to the birds. So sometimes if you get too close to a bird that's up close, it's kind of hard and unmanageable because you're shaking a little bit. And also you're not seeing everything that's in the picture. So I usually use a pair of 8-bys if I do something like a hawk watch where I'm watching raptors from far away, or if I'm doing a sea watch where I'm watching birds that are further out at sea, I'll go with the higher powered binoculars. The advice that I heard when I first started out was to buy the most expensive pair that you can afford. So especially in this time of economic hardship, I'm not going to say go out and buy the best pair that's over $2,000, but remember, this is a lifetime investment. So I bought these. I started bird watching when I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Paraguay. And the first pair that I bought was a pair I bought in Paraguay, which were horrible. I got them for $30 and I birded for 2 years with them. So then when I got back to the United States, I bought these. These were just under $1,000 and I've had them since 2004. So for 16 years, they've been with me. So I recommend that you go into a local store to support a local business, a place where you can actually try these out and see how they feel in your hand. Some might feel heavier, some might feel that as they're not as ergonomical as you would like. So just try them out. That's what I did with these. I really liked them. Bought them from a local business here in Delaware, and I was happy with them. There is a guide that can tell you a lot more than what I'm telling you right now, and that's down here at the bottom. It's an Audubon guide. And also you can just type in, how to buy binoculars for birding into any search engine, and I'll give you a good idea of what you want. Okay, now I'm going to stop share. Okay. All right, so I mentioned the binoculars, I mentioned the field guide. The next thing is to join a birding or nature organization. So once you have the equipment, you can go out and get started. You can do this in your backyard, you can travel to a hotspot and, start bird watching right away. But one of the best ways to get better as a birder, and I misspoke, I said bird watching, you can become a better birder by birding with better birders. So the way that you do that is you get to know people. You can do that through social media. And then we in Delaware have some excellent organizations, which I'm gonna share this screen as well. Okay, so the Delaware Ornithological Society, I'm a member of that. They have meetings on Wednesday nights. In fact, tonight they have a meeting, it's online. Every month you learn something new. There's a guest speaker, a lecturer who teaches you about some new type of bird or new birding initiative or something. The Sussex Bird Club, Delaware Nature Society, and Delaware Audubon Society. So the Delaware Nature Society is also the one that's responsible for coordinating the hawk watch. And there's a lot of overlap with Delaware Ornithological Society with that as well. So becoming members of these organizations is a great way to meet other birders, and it's just a great way to learn about what's going on, where to go, and just stay connected with the birding community. Online resources. So aside from this field guide, this field guide isn't going to give you everything, because Dustin, I'm going to refer to you right now because you had mentioned to me in an email how you love going out into nature and listening for birds. I was actually surprised that you said that, because a lot of people think about birding as a very ocular hobby and don't think about their ears that much, don't rely on their ears that much. But a lot of your birding experience is going to be by ear. And that's one of the hardest aspects of it, especially when you have migrants coming through who are only here for a few weeks. So I've got a house wren out here that I hear all day long. So I know very well what a house wren sounds like, but a wood warbler that's only in town for about 2 weeks, you don't have that long to really learn their songs or, songs or calls, even if you do get a chance to hear their songs or calls. So that way, for that reason, you would want to rely on online resources such as All About Birds. I'm not going to click on that now because it's right straight to it. But if you go to that website, you can type in any kind of bird, and then you'll get a profile of that, a visual profile, and then you can click on sounds or audio, and then you can actually hear what they sound like. And a lot of these also include video, so you can see what they look like when they're moving around. And then the last thing.
Whoops, I'm sorry. You're giving lots of great resources that people can see on the screen. Where do you suggest some good places that you can go birding? I live near the Brandywine Creek State Park, and I hear tons of different birds. So where do you suggest?
Okay, so that's a perfect segue. So the next line down, you're still seeing the shared screen, right? The PowerPoint. Mm-hmm. Next line down is to find and report birds. So I'm going to bring you right into that and share that screen as well. So eBird is an incredible resource, and I'm going to show you how you can use that to answer that question. So you said that you live near, and just nod if you can see this.
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm going to go into, this is what the home page looks like. I'm going to click on Explore. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to move it out of the way because Zoom is in the way. I'm going to go to Explore Hotspots. Now here's the whole world. So this is not biased towards any location. I've birded in Japan, I've birded in Nicaragua. So wherever you are, zoom into that location. The more red or orange to red, the darker red colors that you have indicate higher species count at those hotspots. So let me pull this down. You said you live near where? Brandywine Creek?
Right, but there are lots of other places you can go throughout.
You bet. So if we take a look at this now, there's the state park.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a hotspot. 198 species have been reported there on eBird, and then you've got other places around that. Now you can see that the hotspot designations are a little less dense around here, but there may be some that you aren't aware of, like Hoops Reservoir, which isn't really an easy place to bird. In fact, it actually says private, no access, which means you have to bird as you're rolling through on the bridge and take a look real quick as you go through. But if I pull out, you can see other locations in northern Delaware. So I'm going to bring you in real quick to where I bird a lot, which is the Newark Reservoir. You click on that, and then that brings you to the location. So if you're not using eBird, you're going to want to do, I'm going to make it easy for you right now by just showing you. I have given you county by county hotspots right here. Okay, is that showing, is it in presentation mode, or is it just showing it like I'm actually editing it? Can you read that?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so.
We're in Newcastle County right now.
Right, okay, so I have divided this up into free access and entrance fees. Remember that the entrance fees for the Delaware State Parks run in the summer, not in the winter. But so up here, these are some of the hotspots. Now I'm missing a bunch, but this is not by any means an exhaustive list, which is why I have an asterisk down here that says use eBird to zoom into your location to make it easier to actually, because there'll be small places that you haven't heard of that aren't listed here that are just as good as some of these other places. So here's Newcastle. Here's Kent County. This doesn't look, I didn't put as many on here, but that's because these are powerhouse, you know, superstar hotspots. Bombay Hook National Wildlife Refuge has had the most species recorded on eBird of any hotspot in Delaware. So you could easily spend a day there any time of the year.
So
and then
I want to mention to people who are either watching via Zoom or on Facebook that these are some really wonderful resources, and we will have them up on our website and available for folks to spend more time looking at.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I am going to give you a PDF of this presentation, which you'll be able to, I think, embed with what you upload onto YouTube. And also, I'm going through really quick, knowing that when you do get to YouTube, you can just pause it and write this stuff down. So again, here's an abbreviated list of what you have in Sussex County. Okay, so that is about all I have to share about places to go.
And what would be the most common native birds be that you would find this time of the year?
Okay, great. So I'm going to go to, I'm going to go right to my backyard. So the Newark Reservoir. Here's so this is the actual list for the reservoir right now. Anyone can go to this list, and this is what has been reported, you know, 199 species. So if we look at this list right here, which is from June 13th, which was only a few days ago, this is what I had out there. Now, for a lot of people, some of these birds are going to be, or for most people, some of these birds are going to be very common, like mallard, Canada goose, rock pigeon, mourning dove. But then you might get into some that are a little less familiar to some people. I mean, people have heard of the Baltimore Oriole. It's the mascot for a baseball team. But what about the orchard oriole? So another good thing about eBird is that you can click on that bird species and it brings you right to it. And you can look at a map. Here's the map showing you the range of the bird. And then you can look at how many observations there have been and then different pictures of it. So this is what we would expect. I mean, this is a decent list for June. And then if I go back, you can see that there were days before that there were other birds that I didn't have on June 13th. And then if we look at, you know, if I were to pull up a list from the middle of May, there would be probably somewhere over 60 species because that was during the migration period.
And you'd, excuse me, you'd expect to see different birds in the fall than you would in spring and summer?
Yeah, absolutely. So, so many birds migrate from north to south, south to north, spring and fall, and then some birds will take different routes. So it's more common to see certain birds during spring migration than it is to see them during fall migration. One example I'm just thinking of right now, because I actually saw it here at the reservoir in May once, and I was not aware that it was rare in spring, but the Philadelphia vireo is a rare bird to find in the springtime in Delaware, but not uncommon, shall I say, to find it in the fall. And then there's other examples of birds that you may find in May or June or April through June that you wouldn't find necessarily in the fall. And then winter is a whole different ballgame because you have a lot of birds that they're not just migrating through, they come down and they spend the winter with us here. A lot of ducks. We get a lot of ducks here in winter.
Great. Can you talk about some of the challenges that we have facing native birds in Delaware?
Sure. So I have another slide for this so that I can put this up later for people to see. And I'll just read it actually. So climate change is a huge threat to all wildlife. I could go on for hours talking about that, but people can look that up, I think, to see directly how it affects birds. But habitat loss is another big one. And that's not just local habitat loss. And there's certain places that that are pretty sensitive and we want to be really careful of in Delaware. They have a lot of coastline. We have a lot of migratory shorebirds that come through that rely on the horseshoe crabs. They feed on their eggs to fatten up and continue their flight back up to the Arctic for the summer breeding. But also there is distant habitat loss. So these same birds, like the red knot, which spends our winter in southern Argentina, if there's habitat loss in southern Argentina and that affects the red knot, then it's going to affect it when it comes through and passes through Delaware on the way back, and of course when it gets back up to the Arctic as well. Another big problem is non-native species. We usually are referring to invasive species of plants, trees, and insects, but also there's issues with animals. We are probably the most invasive species, the Homo sapien, but also the cat. The house cat, the domestic cat, is also a threat to birds, which I don't think is new, but that's a threat that continues to exist.
Great. So what can people do to help with some of these challenges? Obviously, don't get cats if you live near a lot of birds, but.
Yeah, well, just going back to, picking up right where you said about cats, and I'm going to share this screen because I made a slide for it. Okay. Cats, keep them indoors. That's the main thing. Cats aren't like dogs. It's not easy to leash them when they're outside. And yeah, I won't go on about cats. I am a cat lover, so it kind of pains me to single out cats in this, but keep them inside. Going back to the top, climate change, I have a link here. This is to the Audubon National website, and they talk about climate change. Habitat loss, when we talk about that, be a conscious consumer. So if just read up on things like seed oils and different types of agriculture. I mean, I think we all know that a large part of the Amazon is threatened by cattle. So if you're a conscious consumer in what you're purchasing, it has a big effect on the wildlife around where it's being farmed or raised. And then also support conservation efforts like the Birdathon. The Delaware Ornithological Society sponsors the Birdathon every year, and all that money goes to purchasing land in Delaware and protecting it for the birds. Non-native species. So if you can remove the non-native species, especially the invasive ones, that's a great start. I've got 2 links down here. One is Audubon Society. They talk about native plants. And then also I've got a link to Dr. Doug Talamay's website. And I will mention him because he has a new book out. His old book, his former book, is this one here. And he has a new book out now. I would say just go to his website. The reason why I'm talking about him is because a lot of people know about him, have heard about him, and he's our local expert, really, talking about native plants and their relationship with the environment. He's an entomologist, so what the plants that attract insects has a big impact on the birds that then eat those insects. So there's this whole food chain relationship, and making the right decision with native plants and trees can really have an impact going down the food chain or up the food chain, either way.
So we're starting to get some really interesting questions. And of course, with the COVID-19 pandemic, people are really conscious about wearing masks and social distancing. So one person has asked if you or other birders have ideas, of where you can go in the Newark area while social distancing, like maybe even walks led by you or someone else.
Yeah, okay, that's a great question. I want to preempt that just a little bit and just mention something that I meant to mention this at the very beginning, and it's regarding safety in general. When I was talking about getting started, one of the things I forgot to mention, which is on my slide, is to be safe. So before COVID, one of the big concerns is ticks. I mean, ticks are always a concern, deer ticks and Lyme disease. So a place like the Newark Reservoir, if you drive there and park in the parking lot on the asphalt and follow the paved loop all the way up, the paved route up to the loop, you're never going to step on grass. So the risk of encountering a deer tick is very low. So a place like that is a good place to bird, especially in the winter, because there's so many ducks that are coming in onto the water, and sometimes some very rare ducks and some very beautiful ducks come onto that water. So that's a very safe place in terms of keeping your footing and being safe from things like ticks. So that's the other thing, is to wear sturdy footwear, because when you are a birder and you are a hardcore birder who wants to go and see what it is that's making noise in the bushes, you are usually unencumbered to go off the beaten path and track that bird down. So you need to have a good pair of sturdy boots so that you don't twist your ankle or something like that. And of course, stay safe from things like ticks. Now that there are a lot of people, and I noticed this year, especially around the peak of migration in May, there are a lot of people out in the parks because a lot of people are confined to their homes, and a lot of people think that the parks are a safe place to go because there aren't going to be a lot of people there. Now, if everyone thinks that, then it kind of backfires. I would say just wear a mask. Keep your distance. For the most part, people don't ever pay me any attention. And like, especially around the Newark Reservoir, I'm not always walking on that paved loop. So I'm kind of stepping off and going somewhere else. There's another park across the street, Curtis Mill Park. And I usually just kind of walk around the perimeter there. And there's a little trail that heads up to the north from the park. And around May, there were a lot more people up there than normal, but a lot of these birding hotspots, they're too far out of the way, in the sense that it's too much of a hike for a lot of people to really get out of their car and go that far in there. So I don't think that there's that much of a concern about running into other people, but I definitely would stay safe. And I'll mention this, White Clay Creek Park was absolutely hopping with migratory wood warblers this last May. So there were a lot of birds that a lot of people had never seen before. That's what we call a life bird. So like the cerulean warbler, Tennessee warblers, some of these warblers that we don't see a lot of, they were there. So once the word got out through the social media that I talked about earlier, a lot of birders descended on those locations. And I noticed even within the birding community, birders who I have birded with in their cars and who I know really well, when we encountered each other, we were keeping our distance, and some people, they were just pulling their masks up right away. So I don't know if I just belabored that point, but just be safe. But for the most part, especially a hot spot like Bombay Hook or even Cape Henlopen, a lot of people aren't even getting out of their cars for a lot of those. Like Bombay Hook especially, a lot of that birding is done by car, especially right now. The biting flies are so bad that you may not want to get out of your car. So in some ways, a place like Bombay Hook is a safe haven for birders right now, because you can just bird from your car.
So you talked earlier about some great field guides. Do you have any recommendations for books or field guides that could help young children recognize specific species?
Yeah, so going back to David Sibley, there is a book here called Sibley's Birding Basics. And I would recommend this. I mean, if I could compress this whole book into a 30-minute presentation, I would have tried to do it. So there's a lot of good stuff here. This gets a little bit more scientific. It's a little more geared towards adults. But there are things like this. So here's the backyard birds of the Mid-Atlantic region. This was a local acquisition because it says Delmarva Power on the back of it. It's a folding pocket guide to familiar backyard species. I don't know where I got this. I picked it up somewhere, but this is very easy because they're all on one page. So these are all of the, warblers and finches and sparrows. Back here, you get to shorebirds and ducks. So it's pretty intuitive for a young mind to just look at these pictures and figure this out. So I would recommend starting out with something like this. And then after you identify the bird here, then go to the other guides to get a better idea of what it looks like in different types of plumages and what different photographs of it look like. And then of course, go to the web resources as well.
These are great. Well, I know you're on the Audubon board. Can you give us a little summary of what they're working on?
Okay, sure. So one of the big things that we talk about a lot in our meetings, and that some of our members are some of our members are strong advocates for the promotion of native species in Delaware. Okay, so some of our members are a member of the Delaware Native Species Commission, which I encourage people to look that up to learn more about that. There's also a Horseshoe Crab Recovery Coalition. We have members on that as well, because as I mentioned, horseshoe crabs are very important to the for the migrating shorebirds that are coming through and bulking up as they continue migrating north. Some of the projects that we've done last summer, we had an inauguration. I think it was last summer. It could have been 2 summers ago. We had an inauguration for some native habitat islands that were installed at 2 city parks in Newark, at the Newark Reservoir and then across the street at Curtis Mill Park. And in those native habitat islands, they look small. So if you go there, you'll see them. They are fenced off, and there will be a sign that advertises that Delaware Audubon funded that and installed those. But there's a long list of native species of plants and trees that were installed there, as well as 50 nest boxes that we know of. At this point, there are at least 4 species of birds that are nesting in those boxes.
Great. Can you tell us one more time what the name of that Delmarva Power booklet was called? We'll try and track it down.
Okay, sure. So it says, so it's part of the Pocket Naturalist Guide series, and it's the Backyard Birds of the Mid-Atlantic Region. a folding pocket guide to familiar backyard species.
Mm.
I've seen a number of these. I mean, I travel around the world and I always go into bookstores, whatever city I'm in, and I go right to the field guide section looking specifically for something like this that's local. So it's not uncommon to find something like this wherever you may go. So this is not the first type of thing that I've seen like this, but this is definitely a good example.
Great. We'll see if we can track it down.
Okay.
So this has really been helpful and fun. A lot of us are really interested in getting out and starting to learn more about birds. Do you have any final comments you'd like to add before we close off?
I don't want to end on a bad note, but you know what? If we do have a few more minutes, I did want to mention one thing that has come up recently in the news. So I think a lot of people have heard about Christian Cooper. Christian Cooper is a member of the New York City chapter of the Audubon Society. He is a black birder who was harassed in the Ramble in Central Park. And this made the news, this made the headlines, and so the story is about racism. So I just want to mention that Black Lives Matter and segue to the fact that just be mindful that all birders look suspicious. Okay. Just remember that as you're getting into birding and as you're getting more interested in looking at what bird is in this tree over here, and then the bird moves to another tree, and then the bird moves to another tree. Next thing you know it, the bird is in a tree that's right in front of someone's house, and someone's bedroom window is right behind it. And you're looking at what appears to be into someone's bedroom when you're actually looking at a bird. So just be mindful of the fact, just respect the neighborhoods where you're birding, respect other birders. Some birders will play the songs or the calls of birds to attract birds. Sometimes that's annoying to other birders because it stresses the birds. Just be safe. And also some of these locations, some of these hotspots that I mentioned, sometimes there's nobody else around. So just be safe for yourself, that someone could misinterpret your actions, and also the fact that you might be the only person who's out there. So just be a smart, safe birder.
That's a great suggestion. Really appreciate that. I do see a couple of questions from people asking about a good local place to get binoculars.
Yeah, okay. That's a great question. And I was afraid that was going to backfire on me. So I bought my binoculars at Cutler Camera, and before they went out of business. Actually, I bought them while they were going out of business, which is why I got such a great deal. That was in the summer of 2004. They were like a local institute here in terms of birding. The founder of Cutler Camera was he's a legend of local birding. I don't know. I would look online. So, use a search engine like Google. I'm not necessarily in the market for them right now, which is why I don't really know. But there are big box places. There are, big chain retailers like REI, Cabela's, that you can go in and you can try out the binoculars. The staff there are usually very accommodating to you, putting 3 or 4 different pairs up on the counter and going through and trying them out. Otherwise, I would just do a search of where to buy binoculars, and search engines are so intuitive these days that I'm sure a map will show up with little pins that say you can buy them at this location or that location.
Yeah, I'm seeing some comments for those who aren't on Zoom. Cape May is a good place.
Okay. Do they say where that is, or to actually go to Cape May?
Cape May Bird Observatory is one place.
Yeah, so that is in Cape May. So, and if you're in northern Delaware, it's not that far. I mean, it's not any further than going to Prime Hook. You just have to cross a bigger bridge.
Okay, great. Well, we really appreciate this great conversation, and like I said before, we're very excited to get out there and start listening and identifying birds.
Great, thank you. I'm sorry, I'm stammering because there's so much more I want to say. There's so much more that I could have said. I'd be open to doing like an introduction to eBird session sometimes, but all of that stuff is available. I mean, if you're watching this right now, then you have access to a computer, and you can go onto YouTube, and you can search a lot of the things that I've been talking about and get, explanations from other people as well.
That's great. We'd love to have you back and maybe even lead a guided tour with some of us once we.
Great. I would love to. Thank you.
Thank you.